I am really excited. Thank you again for being here tonight. If this is your first time, my name is Chris. I am the college pastor here at Brazos Fellowship, and I love what tonight is because tonight is week 2 in our series, Exposed. And last week, we kicked everything off, and we started talking about how we all have different areas in our life where we let things kind of get in our way. We let things build up a wall, and so often it can begin to define us. It can begin to mask and disguise us from the people around us. And last week we talked specifically about how shame can do that in our life. That shame wants to speak for us. Shame wants to tell us and everyone around us that we don't have any value, that we're worthless. But as we looked at last week, God says that is not true. That you're not defined by your past, you're not defined by previous decisions, you're not defined by your shame. He wants to take your shame, he wants to flip it, and he wants to use it as a sign of his salvation. So I encourage you, if you weren't here last week, get on our YouTube channel and you can watch that video and get caught up. But tonight, we're going to look at another area in our life that we tend to hide from the people around us, or that we let it hide us from the people in our life. Now, does anyone in here like to travel? Do we have any travel fans? Okay, yes. Road trips are awesome. I love to travel. I especially love to fly. Okay, I love going to airports, seeing other countries, other cultures, and if you have the opportunity, you should totally do it because it can be life-changing to see how other people do life and how they live. It's awesome. It's one of my favorite things, the packing, the planning, the travel. In fact, honestly, probably my favorite part out of the whole experience is getting there. It's the route, the travel. I love, and this is kind of weird, but I'm just being honest with you tonight, I really like airports. Okay, I like going into new airports and seeing different places, and I love to people watch in airports. Now, I'm not one of those people that'll just like go sit in a park and watch people. I'm not a people watcher, okay? I'm not a creep. But when I'm at the airport, I'm there for a purpose, okay? I'm actually going somewhere. It would be super weird if you just went to the airport and sat there and watched people. That would be weird. But if you're actually going to get on a plane and leave eventually, it's okay. And as you people watch, it's like an aquarium for humans, okay? There's all of these different species and cultures and all these different people that are kind of moving around and bumping into the glass, and it's really, really fun to just watch. Because if you look around, you start to see a lot of different people, right? There's like happy people that are so excited that they're going on vacation or their honeymoon or they're going to see some new place. And then there's like the business people that are all serious and they have the Bluetooth in their ear and they're just walking back and forth and talking about what's so important or whatever. It's like, can it wait? Like, come on. Just chill for a minute. And then there's people that are they're just tired, so they like have their hoodie pulled over their head or they're crashed in the corner on the floor. And then there's the people that have the screaming kids, right? And except they don't realize that their kids are screaming. Everyone else in the airport knows that their kid is screaming and running back and forth, but they seem completely oblivious to the situation. Those are the people that I want to just walk up and be like, your kid is screaming. Do something about it, right? No one else appreciates your screaming kid right now. And then there's one other group of people that you frequently see in the airport. These are the nervous flyers, right? Does anyone not like to fly? Anyone nervous of airplanes? It's okay. Yeah, I see a few hands, right? So I have plenty of friends that just don't like getting on a plane. And you can spot these people because they're constantly like pacing back and forth. They can't sit still waiting to get on the plane. They're just really nervous about what comes next. And it's not necessarily, it's different for everyone. It's not necessarily like the flying. It's just that they have some questions, right? They have some doubts or concerns, like when was the last time this airplane was inspected? Like, does it have a perfect flying record? Did it get hit by a bird on its way here? Hey, pilot, did you actually do everything necessary to fly this thing, right? It's that whole, like, possibility of plummeting out of the sky to an instant death. That's the thing that kind of freaks them out. And that's fair, right? It's fair. It's not rational. It's not logical. Like, you're more likely to be struck by lightning while driving a car in an earthquake than you are to die in a plane crash. Yes, I just made that up. But it's not very likely for you to die on an airplane. But it doesn't matter if it's logical or not, because it's still how they feel. They still have some questions and concerns. And I don't know if you've ever thought about it before, but it kind of does make sense. It's a giant metal tube that's bigger than your house, that has wings on it, that floats in the air magically 35,000 feet above the ground and flies over 500 miles an hour. I mean, that's casual, no big deal, right? Maybe you have felt like that, whether it was airplanes or not. Maybe you felt like that and you were sitting in class and your professor just finished explaining the theory of relativity. And you're like, what? I have no idea what you just said. And then the professor's like, so does anyone have any questions? And this is the moment, right? You're looking around, you're like, okay, I have some questions, but I don't want to be the first person to raise my hand. So you're looking around, you're like, surely somebody, why is no one raising their hand? There's no way that you all understood what he just said. Like, I have some concerns here, like, not just what's going to be on the test. I don't even know what you said. Like, what in the world are you talking about? It's uncomfortable to feel like we're the only person that has a question, right? It's uncomfortable. We kind of feel like we're all alone, that we're just out here on this island and everybody else is on the same page. Everybody else knows what's going on except for us. And it's like, why am I the only one here? And there is no place in the world for most people that makes you feel more uncomfortable about vocalizing your questions and your doubts than this place, the church, right? Because you look around and everyone's singing all the songs, everyone's clapping their hands or raising their hands, they know when to stand up, they know when to sit down, they speak a special language, like everybody's doing the same thing. They all seem to have it all together. They're taking notes and they're like, yeah, that's so good. And they have the Bible app on their phone and you don't want to stick out. You don't want to draw attention to yourself. And so what do? We just fit right in. We just pretend like we don't have these questions, these concerns, these doubts. It's like, no. I'm just gonna fit right in. And so what we do is we do one of two things. We either hide our questions and our doubts. We just pretend like they don't exist. We pretend like we're on the same page as everyone else. Or we hide behind our questions and our doubts. And we decide, hey, you know what? I have these reservations and concerns, and so I'm just going to check out. I'm going to take a step back, and I'm not going to engage. I'm not going to try and find an answer. I'm not going to try and find clarity to my questions and our doubts. And so last week, as we were talking about us getting into community, as we're talking about us being real with the people around us, we talked specifically about the only way that we can really be known by the people around us is if we actually know ourselves. We have to expose what's going on in our heart and in our mind. And we looked at this quote from Donald Miller's book, Crazy Love. It says, to have intimate relationships, you have to show people who you really are. We have to know ourselves to truly be known. Maybe it's time for you that you exposed what's going on, even your doubts, to the people around you, and you begin to find some clarity. And that's the only way that you can grow in community and authentic relationships. Now, why have we been trained to hide our doubts? I mean, maybe for you growing up, your parents, I know this was true for me, your parents or maybe your grandparents just told you, hey, this is the way it is. Like, just get in line. Just believe. This is what truth is. This is what you're supposed to say. This is what you're supposed to do. So just go do it, right? You don't talk back. You don't question. You don't have doubts. You don't try and discover what you believe for yourself. It's just like, well, that's what my dad said. And so that must be true. And I'm just going to get in line and do what I'm supposed to do. Or maybe you believe that, okay, if God's in heaven and he can see everything, and if he sees or hears that I'm having doubts or questions, like he's probably going to get mad at me. And then he's going to strike me with lightning driving a car in an earthquake. Or he's going to make my plane fall out of the sky and I'm going to plummet to my death. I don't want to make God mad, so I'm just going to keep my questions to myself. Or maybe you're worried that someone will be disappointed in you if you have questions, or if you're honest about your doubts or your concerns. Or maybe you're disappointed in yourself. because you feel like you should have a stronger faith. You should know the answers to these questions. Why does this keep popping up? Why do you keep coming back? Why are you repeating this circle over and over? Chris, you should have this figured out by now. And so we just stuff it inside. We close the door. We pretend like they don't exist. Or even worse, we disconnect. And we take a step back from what is good or what is true because we let our doubts decide for us. Now, this probably isn't news to you, okay? But keeping quiet doesn't help you find answers. And it definitely does not get rid of your doubts. But we've convinced ourselves that doubt is bad. But what if I told you tonight that doubt is not always a bad thing? In fact, doubt is definitely not a new thing. There are a lot of people all throughout these letters that are a collection that come together that we call the Bible. There are all of these stories about people who actually experienced and interacted with Jesus. They saw him when he was walking and talking and breathing. They saw him perform miracles, and they still had some uncertainty and some doubt. And if they can have doubt and question, I would say we're in pretty good company with our doubts. One of those stories we're going to look at tonight, it kind of an extreme example of this, and it's a story being told by one of Jesus' closest friends. It's Mark, one of his disciples, and disciple is a fancy word for like devoted follower. And so Mark is telling this story of Jesus and his interaction with a man. Now, Jesus had been away with a couple of other disciples, a couple of his friends, and they're coming back to the larger group of followers. And as they're approaching the group of disciples, they notice there's this argument going on between some of the disciples and a few other religious leaders. And so Jesus is trying to figure out what's going on when we pick up the story in Mark chapter 9, verse 16. Jesus says, "Hey, what are you arguing with them about?" he asked. And a man in the crowd answered, "Hey, teacher, I brought you my son who's possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech. And whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they couldn't." This is like a scene out of a horror film, okay? Like, there's this guy, and he brings his son to Jesus and his disciples, and this kid is being attacked. He's like possessed by this evil spirit. And based on what the dad says, we know a couple of things. We know that the boy can't speak, that he is being thrown to the ground uncontrollably, and he's losing control of all of his ability to move. Now, I don't know about you, but if that happened right now, it would freak me out, okay? Like, I hope that doesn't happen to any of y'all, because I'm not sure I would know what to do. And that's what happens for the disciples. They're not really sure how to respond or what to do. And especially the dad, right? Can you imagine if this is your own child? And so the dad brings this kid to Jesus because he just wants him to be better. Now, we don't know why the dad came to Jesus in this moment. Like, why now? Why today? Did he have previous opportunities? Like, had he been waiting? Maybe he had heard about how Jesus had changed other people's lives, how Jesus had intersected with other people's stories, or maybe this was his last resort. He had tried everything else. He had tried to find healing. He had tried to find answers. He had tried to figure it out for his son, and he had no other options. Whatever the reason, he comes to Jesus. And he's like, "Jesus, can you do something, please? Can you fix or heal my son?" And after a brief conversation with the dad, Jesus asks for the boy to be brought to him. It continues. So they brought him, the son. And when the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. And he fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the boy's father, "How long has this been going on? How long has he been like this?" "From childhood," he answered. "It has often thrown him into the fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us." I want us to look at this last sentence. The dad is standing there talking to Jesus, and he says, "Hey, but if you can do anything." He's standing there in front of Jesus. I'm not talking about like theoretical Jesus or metaphorical Jesus or theological Jesus. I'm talking about man Jesus. He's standing right there, looking eye to eye, carrying on a conversation with the creator of the universe. And at this point in Jesus' story, in Jesus' ministry, he had already calmed raging seas, walked on water, healed people of incurable diseases, raised a girl to life simply by saying a word. Like, Jesus can take care of the situation, no problem. But in that moment, the dad says, hey, if you can. Maybe it was the emotion of the situation, right? Where he forgot who he was talking to. I think for most of us, if we found ourselves in that moment, we would have just like, hey, Jesus, take care of this. I know you can do it. Like, here we go. Even if we don't fully believe it, we're not going to tell Jesus we don't believe in him, right? We're not going to be honest and say, hey, Jesus, I'm not really sure you can pull this off, but I mean, it'd be pretty cool if you did. I mean, let's see. Here you go, right? But I think that it's so cool for this dad in this moment when he's requesting something of Jesus, but he is honest about what's actually going on the inside. He doesn't put up a front. He doesn't run away from his doubt. He doesn't hide his questions. He's honest, and he's like, hey, God, I'm not sure how I feel about this, but if you can, will you do something? How does Jesus respond? Like, does Jesus like get mad at him? Does he shoo him away? Does he correct him? Does he belittle him? No. Jesus repeats the man's question, and I don't think he's doing it to like demean the dad. I think that he repeats the guy's question because he's like, hey, I am right here with you. Like, I'm moving into your situation. I'm in the middle of your uncertainty. I'm in the middle of your questions. I'm in the middle of your doubts. And Jesus responds like this in verse 24. Verse 23. If you can, said Jesus, everything is possible for one who believes. And the dad quickly responds, and he's like, hey, Jesus, no, that's not what I meant. Like, I totally believe. God, you got it all wrong. No. The dad, still in this moment, owns his disbelief, and he responds. Immediately, the boy's father exclaimed, I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. Now, this is a really strange response from the dad, okay? I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. I mean, essentially, he's saying, like, I believe, but I don't. Like, I want to believe, but I still have some questions. Like, I want to have faith, but I have doubts. I think that when we slow down and we're honest, our faith, we can resemble with this guy a lot. Like, we can connect with him if we're honest. Because I know for myself, there are so many times where there's this tension and this pull between my faith and my doubt. I find myself somewhere between belief and unbelief. And we feel this tension, and we feel like faith and doubt are polar opposites, that they can't possibly work together, but things are not always as they seem. Opposites don't always cancel each other out. Think about it like this. We would say that big is the opposite of small, right? We would say that tall is the opposite of short. Cold is the opposite of hot. We would say that water is the opposite of fire. But is it? Like, water puts out fire, but it doesn't always put out fire, right? Have you ever seen a grease fire or an oil fire? If you add water to that fire, what does it do? It causes it to get bigger, right? It strengthens the fire. Even though it's two things that seem complete opposites, they seem to contradict each other. How can fire and water coexist? But that's exactly what happens sometimes. And that it can be like that for our faith. We can let faith and doubts sit on opposite ends, and we feel like we have to choose between the two, or we can come to this place where we own our doubt, and it can actually lead to strengthening our faith. When you choose to own your doubt, it can actually lead to growing and strengthening your faith. See, in the case of the man and his son, his faith brought him to Jesus, but his doubt started the conversation. His faith brought him there, but his doubt actually started the conversation with Jesus. See, the guy knew what he should say. He should say, hey, Jesus, you got this. Jesus, heal my son. Jesus, I've seen you do it before. Jesus, I've heard stories. Other people have told me you're capable. But he wasn't there. Even though all of those things may have been true, he wasn't there. And so he started the conversation in his doubts. But God responded to his doubt, and he healed his son. And that can be the same for us. If we choose to own our doubt, it can help us grow and strengthen our faith. It can help, but you have to choose to be honest. So what does that look like? Here are two really quick things as we close up. The first thing is stop ignoring your doubts. Stop ignoring your doubts. You can't pretend like they don't exist. You can't hide them. You can't bottle them up. You can't put them behind the closed door. You can't just toe the party line and say, well, everyone else agrees and everyone else believes this, and so I'm just going to jump in and just go with the flow. You got to stop ignoring your doubts. In fact, if this is you tonight and you're like, yeah, I have some questions, I have some doubts, I want to encourage you tonight, before you go to bed, take out your phone, take out a note card, write down a couple of questions or a couple of doubts. It may be about faith. It may be about your future. It may be about some other situation in your life and how God interacts with that. It may be about what you believe, about who you are. It doesn't matter what it is. Expose your doubts and your questions. Bring them into the light. And as you begin to expose them, truth will begin to bring you freedom. But it can't stop there. The first thing is stop ignoring your doubts. And the second thing is start a conversation. You need to be honest with someone about your doubts. Stop ignoring them and then be honest with somebody else about your doubts. Now, I'm not talking about you standing up in an environment like this. You go to church on Sunday and you're like, hey, pastor, I have a couple questions. If we could just talk for a second before you finish. I'm not talking about that. But what I am talking about is exposing, right? Shining a light on, opening up to someone else around you. You stop ignoring it, you recognize it's there, you shine a light on it, and then you share it with someone else. This may be a close friend. It may be one of the leaders here at 242. If you get plugged into a small group, maybe it's someone in your small group, but sharing it with someone else, and here's what's going to happen. You're going to discover that they too have questions and doubts. You are not alone in this journey. See, everyone at some point, if they're honest, has doubts. I have questions and doubts. Still, today, I'm 36 years old. I'm a college pastor. I still have doubts. I still have questions. I still have things that I have to wrestle with and figure out what I believe and what God says and where I fit in the middle of that, right? Your friends have doubts. They may not admit it, but they do. The person sitting next to you has doubts. Here's the difference. Some people are honest about it, and some people aren't. Some people find clarity and strength, and they grow. Some people don't. You get to choose which one you want to be. Because you can pretend like fire and water are opposites and they can't coexist, or you can be honest and recognize that if I own my doubts, I can actually let it strengthen my faith. In fact, I would say that until you have owned some doubts, until you have struggled through some questions, you have not fully discovered what your faith can look like. And so make that decision today. Here's the reason why I think small groups are so important. Because you were not intended to do this alone. You weren't intended to do life alone. You weren't intended to find answers and work through struggles and deal with your doubts by yourself. This dad couldn't deal with it by himself. He brought it to Jesus. The other disciples are there. He opens up. He gets it out in the open, and then God moves in the middle of his situation. man, I'm telling you, make a commitment to surround yourself with some other people, to stop ignoring your doubts, to open up to the people around you about what's really going on in your life. Bring some exposure and watch God move. Let's pray.